San Antonio in the 1830s, about 2,000 residents. It's the kind of the final outpost on the frontier. And what's happening is Texas, which now owns Texas, having won its independence, is giving out what they call head rights. So if you want to get a head right, meaning free land. So all you had to do to get your free land outside of San Antonio was go survey the land. The surveyors would go out and survey it, and the Comanches would kill them in ever more imaginative ways, because the Comanches understood exactly that the instruments did steal the land. The instruments were the mechanism of the theft. And so part of the deal was how can you keep the surveyors alive? Hayes was originally a surveyor, but he eventually just got good at keeping other surveyors alive. And these guys who could do that eventually became known as rangers. And they evolved as Comanche fighters, fighting like Comanches did. I mean, they learned bird signs to track people. They would, make cold camp. You never made a campfire if you were around Comanches. They learned these techniques of warfare, and they got really good at it. They just had this one problem, and the problem was that they had 3 shots. They had Kentucky long rifle, bang, and 2 single-shot pistols. And that's all they had.
Today I want to tell the tale of the Desert Rangers in Fallout. There's a lot here, and it goes in a lot of different roads. There's different things to draw from, and it's not all coming directly from the Fallout universe. There are parallels to draw from, and a lot that I didn't know was there. Now, initially, like many of you, and perhaps some of you don't have any idea at all, my idea of the Desert Rangers story was sort of something like, there's this independent group of people who train really hard, they're survivors, they help out other people, they eventually get pressed by the Legion, and then they have to get absorbed by the NCR. That's sort of what happens, but there's so much more to it than that, and I want to get into it. The Desert Rangers are a faction that once appeared as a group of men and women who learn survival and combat skills in order to go out into the world and have a chance of surviving and making things better, as Tycho from the original Fallout puts it. The Desert Rangers, in many ways, have had their identity mangled and manipulated. To begin with their story, we have to understand why it is so complicated. The Desert Rangers' tale requires that we understand a bit about another faction, the New California Republic. To attempt to quickly describe the New California Republic, or their abbreviated title, the NCR, they're a federal republic that by the time of Fallout New Vegas maintains 5 states comprised from territories within what was pre-war Northern and Southern California, as well as Oregon and Nevada. Keep in mind, this is not meant to paint the idea that they control or maintain the entirety of these states to the T of their exact borders in our current understanding. However, they are perhaps the most powerful force in the wasteland and largely draw inspiration from a modern perspective on the real-world United States. This leads many players of New Vegas to find a sense of familiarity with the faction and have an easier time understanding the NCR and their provided context as they explore the game world. That's a topic for another video, yet it's important to understand this because the themes and topics that arise from the NCR in-game draw attention to notable historical struggles the real-world nation deals with. Through this familiarity, many players of New Vegas might quickly view the NCR as the good side and Caesar's Legion as the bad side. The internal dialogue shouldn't stop there when interacting with these factions, however. Make no mistake about it, the NCR is a nation looking to conquer the New Vegas region, just the same as Caesar's Legion. I draw this comparison because the NCR shares another thing in common with the Legion. Caesar's Legion, famously referred to as the army of 87 tribes, conquered and unified under one. They evoke this image to spread fear in the face of their foes, and their opponents use it to demonize them. What we're going to discuss with the Desert Rangers, however, will illuminate why the New California Republic is not without hypocrisy in this demonization of the Legion's absorbing of tribes. This is what brings us back to the Desert Rangers. The Desert Rangers within the Fallout universe begin in a region of what was Nevada and Arizona, but we can go even further back into their history than this. Many of us think of the iconic Ranger armor when we think of the Desert Rangers. However, their identity has been developed from title to title, finally culminating in a more organized form by the time of Fallout New Vegas, despite them not technically existing anymore when that game does take place. For example, Tycho, who is a companion of the Vault Dweller from the original Fallout game, is a Desert Ranger. He does not yet appear to be wearing the famous armor in-game, however. Yet, upon reading his in-game description, we can see it describes a dusty leather-armored trench coat with a gas mask. Despite the in-game execution leaving this out, we can see the beginning of what would become. Tycho is cited as originally being a nod to the Desert Rangers of Wasteland, a game that predates the Fallout titles, but Wasteland's story is not an extension of Fallout, so the story of the Desert Rangers does not come from an older game here necessarily. Tycho notes in-game that the Desert Rangers were inspired by a group known as the Texas Rangers. This is where things start to get a little interesting, because Fallout follows an alternate timeline to ours, so much of the United States' early history remains true within Fallout as well. The Texas Rangers is a real-life investigative law enforcement agency, also known as the Texas Ranger Division, or the Los Diablos Tejanos, which is Spanish for the Texan Devils. The real-life Texas Rangers engaged in dealing with murder, political corruption, as well as detective work, which adds to the art that almost evokes a Batman-like watchful protector of the waste type look that the Desert Rangers have on the New Vegas cover, as well as other artwork. They were also involved in riot control, which brings us to the Desert Rangers' iconic armor. If you have played the Lonesome Road expansion for Fallout New Vegas, you'll likely stumble across one, if not multiple pairs of armor that look incredibly similar to what the Rangers wear, yet it's called riot gear. This gear is said to have been used by the United States Marine Corps, Army units in the Western United States, as well as, and more importantly to our topic, certain law enforcement agencies. The Texas Rangers, for example, were likely a group donning this armor in pre-war United States during their riot control, especially as the riot gear in name is also noted to have been used by certain law enforcement in Los Angeles. Through this, we can see how the idea and image of the Desert Rangers is forming. Group is primarily derived from the incredibly harsh and inhospitable environment of the United States Southwest. If you have ever had the chance to visit the area in real life, or you're from there even, you'll know how hot, dry, and vast it is. Breaking down in a vehicle or getting lost without being able to reach help can be a death sentence. Keeping backup drinkable water storage is a must in the area, and taking serious precautions to heat as well as flash flood warnings is a genuine concern. Spending some time in this region, if you're not used to it, can be a real eye-opener to your mortality. Keep in mind, I'm still talking about real life, not the post-apocalyptic version of this region depicted in Fallout. The group of Desert Rangers that emerged from an immensely difficult environment developed skills relevant to their lives. The Desert Rangers originally began out of necessity, individuals finding out ways to survive in the harsh lands they knew as home, and eventually coming together to learn and help one another survive. As Tycho notes, they hold ideals from the former Texas Rangers. They eventually develop these skills with a purpose in mind. They want to make the wasteland quote-unquote better, one step at a time. If only things worked out like that in Fallout. For some time, perhaps it does. With the Desert Rangers donning their riot gear, evoking the image of the wasteland's watchful protectors, establishing the respect of the wasteland civilians as they sought to fight raiders and corruption, just as the Texas Rangers before them. The Desert Rangers in their early stages maintain a certain mystique. They did not act as rulers over those who they protected, nor would their numbers allow for such a thing. Early on, a culture of intense training to create an elite set of somewhat independently functioning members was established. This is not a group of soldiers who follow a bunch of orders sent down a chain of command. They fend off raiders and help in situations you might find in a Fallout game. The Desert Rangers lived a life of struggle, but it was fulfilled through a purpose that they lived out every day. Unfortunately for them, a man from the New California Republic, operating under a group known as the Followers of the Apocalypse, named Edward Sallow, was making his way further east from his home. The band produced by the New California Republic and sent east by a group of largely peace-loving medical and scientific personnel in the Followers of the Apocalypse would go on to find himself recreating his image of Rome by, as I stated previously, uniting 87 tribes from the southwest region of the United States after the expedition went wrong and led him to using alternative methods of survival. A story for another day, perhaps. This enormous culmination of tribes united into Caesar's Legion would make their way to Arizona, a region our Desert Rangers maintained safety in along with areas of Nevada. Caesar's Legion would be far too great of a match for the elite yet small group of Desert Rangers. This would essentially mark their end. Something you'll find when understanding Fallout is that these stories don't always, or even often for that matter, end how you might like them to. The Desert Rangers not only have their numbers smashed to a fragment of what was already a relatively small force, they are also forced out of Arizona. As of now, Arizona is under the near total control of Caesar's Legion. There is no ongoing resistance that we know of. In fact, much of what we know about Caesar's lands would indicate the opposite, as in complete control, minimal presence of even raider groups, let alone opposing military factions, exist within their borders. This is where the Desert Rangers story starts to become intertwined with the story of the NCRs. The Desert Rangers were crushed and forced west by the Legion, and in this ran into another wall of an empire forming out of the ashes of the post-war US. The NCR, for what might have appeared as a warm and fuzzy two-headed teddy bear at first, when the Rangers needed aid against the Legion, slowly became their true devourers as the two-headed grizzly showed its coat's true colors. A statue that marks one of New Vegas' early in-game visual markers it uses throughout the world to draw the player in, displays the meeting point of the Desert Rangers and their joining of the NCR, or so they refer to it. Now here is where the story might start to get a bit more confusing, so stick with me the best you can. The NCR Rangers existed before the joining of the Desert Rangers into the NCR technically. It's not like the NCR existed and they didn't have some such Rangers and then the Desert Rangers were brought into them and now they make up the NCR Rangers in totality. It's really two separate groups that were not a part of the NCR military being joined into one at once. The NCR Rangers, again not the Desert Rangers, were a separate group primarily dedicated to abolishing slavery in the New California Republic as well as the rest of the wasteland. You might see why they're in direct dispute with Caesar's slave army. The NCR Rangers were founded by a man named Seth, who alongside the other Rangers helped abolish slavery in the southern NCR. Oddly enough, the northern NCR has seemingly not abolished slavery yet, adding perhaps another mirror image for what the United States, where the North notoriously abolishes slavery first, later forcing the South to get on board. The NCR Rangers not only helped pass legislation to free slaves, but also acted similarly to the Underground Railroad during the use of slavery in the southern United States, as the Rangers helped free slaves from the northern NCR territory to escape to the South where slavery is illegal. Originally, I assumed the story of the Desert Rangers was about one group getting eaten by a larger one, eventually leading the Desert Rangers to lose their true causes in place of a hungry empires. Now they act on behalf of a military group and government that seeks power and control in an imperialistic fashion. The Desert Rangers, who once helped protect the wasteland from corruption, would now be the face of the empire that sought to take it all, and perhaps lead humanity down a similar path that led to the nuclear destruction that started the series. How tragic. Now I realize it is potentially much more tragic. This isn't just the story of the Desert Rangers, it's the story of the Rangers from within the NCR as well. The tale of two groups of people who are capable and willing to help others, guided by similar ethics, morals, and practices. They found a way to become great at existing in a harsh world, and they make the sacrifices necessary to carry out their lives while also finding fulfillment in stopping those who want to take advantage of the vulnerable. Although in an individual-to-individual case, the Rangers were all just people, skilled and flawed in their own ways, the image of both groups of Rangers on either side of the NCR's borders was one that garnered respect and admiration from those who they aided, and fear from those who opposed them. They were both in many ways the wasteland's forces of dark knights, watchful and unyielding protectors. But in 2271, where the enormous statue of a Desert Ranger shakes the hand of an NCR Ranger, we see a monument to both groups of Rangers dying in a way. The freedom-fighting slavery rebels and the desert-surviving lawbringers would be brought to their knees by the New California Republic and Caesar's Legion all at once. Unable to defeat the unending Legion and unable to deny the expanding NCR, both idealistic groups tumble at once into the NCR's ranks. Much of what occurs within the Rangers today involves them fighting the Legion as you might expect. What's important to understand in this current situation, though, is that to continue their fight with the Legion, they had to sacrifice themselves and fight fire with fire, empire with empire, ideology with ideology. While the Rangers notoriously maintain some level of self-control in their operation from the greater NCR military, they ultimately act on its behalf. For now, they fight the Legion as it's a common enemy. But even if they defeat the Legion, how long until the Rangers are used for the greed of the bloated government, drunk on victory and ready to commit some atrocities of their own now that the Legion is out of the way? How long until the Rangers are told to point their enormous anti-material rifles at people they once might have sworn to protect? Unfortunately, this brings us to the end of the story of the Desert Rangers for now. Their identity and function as a group, as effective as it was, has been absorbed as a tribe lost to time within the beast of the NCR. We meet them at an early stage of this process in New Vegas when the wound is fresh, yet as time goes on, any Rangers that existed before the Ranger Unification Treaty is signed will slowly die off, and the NCR's ability to take on the image of the Desert Rangers and make it their own, as well as including the Ranger image in NCR propaganda, will only aid in dissolving what remains of the Desert Rangers and the Rangers that fought to abolish slavery in the NCR. In doing this, the New California Republic is able to sweep its history and current use of slavery under the rug by making propagandistic war heroes out of what were truly two separate groups of wasteland freedom fighters. These groups now answer to the NCR chain of command and carry out the nation's desires. Chief Hanlon now leads the Rangers, but states that they take care of much of what needs done on their own as an autonomous group. Yet tensions continue to rise between the branches of the NCR military. The Rangers are led by Chief Hanlon, as I stated, while General Oliver is supposed to have control over the total army. Perhaps in a future entry, we will see what becomes of the Rangers. If the Legion wins the Battle of Hoover Dam in Vegas, we will likely see the complete end of them, as they would be further absorbed into the NCR and pushed far out of the region they once called home. If the NCR achieves victory, however, we might see the Ranger Treaty dissolve, as many members, including the Chief, have clear frustrations with their current predicament within the NCR. Perhaps the Rangers would aim to return to their ways previously, with two groups of similar minds now joined, left to finish off what remains of the Legion and other raider groups and ending slavery in northern NCR territory. But perhaps the NCR wouldn't plan on allowing them to break that treaty without a fight. There's a lot of parallels that can be drawn within the Desert Rangers story, and I've found them through researching them to be a pretty fascinating aspect of the Fallout timeline, or Fallout lore, if you will. Getting absorbed into the NCR is created from a situation that is born of an NCR citizen. Edward Salo is from the NCR. He's a follower of the Apocalypse, and through being in the followers of the Apocalypse, he becomes educated. He reads and he studies, and he learns about ancient Rome. And then when he's off doing missions for the followers of the Apocalypse, spreading the word and helping, he decides to take that time to create a massive military once he's captured by a group of tribals that he educates in warfare. And he finds that he has a skill in this and becomes a Caesar in his own mind. And then we see that as his story progresses and he expands in territory, he pushes the Desert Rangers back into the NCR. So the NCR sort of sends out, in a way, produces this man that creates this vast army, and that vast army ends up pushing the Desert Rangers into the NCR and losing their identity. In a weird way, the NCR almost indirectly destroys the Desert Rangers and directly destroys the Desert Rangers. I'd love to get your thoughts and perspective on the Desert Rangers below and the whole situation involved. I think it's one of those factions that is vaguely understood by many, but fully understood by few. I don't even think I fully have an understanding of it. Who knows where the minds of the writers were when they were creating this faction and what they were using as inspiration entirely. I can only assume things and draw some conclusions based off of information we have from interviews, as well as things from the Fallout Bible and things like that. But it's hard to know, exactly where everybody's brain was when they were coming up with the faction. What's entirely unique, what is inspired and mimicked. It's really interesting to learn about, though, because a lot of the stuff that's in Fallout falls into an actual historical timeline. There's a bit of an overlap there because it is alternate history. So much of what exists in the Fallout universe is often drawing inspiration from something that is from our universe, which is, not untrue of many mediums that we involve ourselves in, whether it be TV shows, movies, or other video games. In my Midwestern Brotherhood of Steel video, I ended with a quote. I'll link that video in the description and some other places, but I'll do the same for the Desert Rangers here. This quote's from Tycho. "We Rangers hail from back east, what used to be called Nevada. Our heritage stretches back to the days of the Texas Rangers. We learn survival and combat skills in order to go out into the world and have a chance of surviving and making things better."
What they used the Texas Rangers for in the Mexican War, which is emblems, and these Rangers just went and cleared out these whole areas, and nobody had seen this type of warfare before. Nobody had seen this kind of ability to fight and move mounted and move with these, nobody had ever seen these Walker Colts, these 5-pound hand cannon 6-shooters that they had. Nobody had seen those either. And so these crazy, these Rangers that dressed any way they wanted to, sometimes with no shirts on and serapes and crazy hats. I mean, they were just the Rangers. Everybody was scared to death of them.